This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. Today, our episode is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation, and I'm so honored to talk to Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath. He is an author, educator, and a neuroscientist who is blending his skills in education and neuroscience to improve education and help parents understand how to help their children be better learners. Thank you for coming on, Dr. Horvath.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this.
You are coming out with a new book. It may be out by the time we air, and it's called The Digital Delusion. And we want to talk all about that book. But first, we want to lay a foundation. I want my listeners to hear from you about the neuroscience of memory and storage of information.
Yeah. So do you want to start with maybe kind of the process of how information gets in to memory to see if that's kind of... Yeah. So I think everyone has heard of the term attention, and that's the best way to think of attention. Think of attention like the filter that determines what's relevant gets into your memory, things you can learn, what's irrelevant gets blocked out. So you can assume, man, the world is a very noisy place, yet somehow we can sit in a cafe like a Starbucks with a giant coffee machine hissing and kids talking and people screaming, yet you can still sit there and type an email or read a book. That's the power of attention, to block out what's unnecessary, bring in what's relevant. That's going to be our first obstacle or question when it comes to modern tech. Is our attention changing because of the way computers are forcing kids to interact with the world? And a good rule of thumb, anything biological has not changed at all. I mean, we're 150,000 years old of one thing. It ain't going to change in 10 years. So believe it or not, our attention is basically exactly the same. It's the way we've chosen to use it seems to change. We're building a world where we set our attention based on the context we're in. If I'm in a quiet movie theater, I will set my attention that allows me to sit for 2 hours. If I'm looking at a screen, I'll set my attention in a way that says every minute you need something new. If I'm at a dinner table, I'll set it differently. If I'm in a classroom, we set our attention to different contexts. But as technology has bled into every single context, we set our attention for the screen, and the screen demands a very short attention span. So when you see a screen in a classroom, don't be surprised when we have short attention spans. When you see a screen at a dinner table, like in a cell phone, don't be surprised when you see short attention. It's not that things have changed. It's just the tool has begged us to use it in a very specific way that largely is going to harm long-term retention, long-term learning, long-term memory, things like that. So does that kind of make sense on the attention front?
Mm-hmm. What parts of the brain are used for attention, and how's that different for storage?
It's interesting. Some people, attention and memory get really conflated in the literature because they use very similar parts of the brain. So there will be some scientists who say, look, it's all one network. Attention and memory is one thing. But if you had to differentiate, you could say attention is diffused throughout the brain, but realistically, there's a little nugget behind your left eye called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Woo, that sounds fun. It's simply put, just think of this as kind of your rule set. This is the part of attention that deems what's relevant and what's irrelevant. So I always kind of say, like, I don't know if you ever played old video games growing up, but we used to get those little cartridges, and you put the cartridge in the little machine and it would tell you what you could play. That part of your brain is the cartridge. That says, here are your characters, here's what's relevant, here's what you can pay attention to, here's what we're going to ignore. And that is irrelevant to memory. So I'd say if you had to pick one spot of your brain linked to attention and nothing else, I'd say that's kind of your most important part. That's where we can say that's where the rule set is plugged in that says, what am I going to filter out so that you can learn it later? And it seems to have nothing really to do with memory in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So do you want to go now past the attention into the memory aspect?
Yeah.
So once you get past attention, now we get into memory. Now we get to start locking things down. And if you think about it, man, what is learning but memory? if it's locking things down, storing it so you can access it later. When it comes to memory, there's kind of two very important things to kind of hold into mind. One is there does not appear to be a limit to what we can hold on to. People talk about memory limits, how much we can store, as though the brain is a computer. The brain isn't a computer. We just use that as a metaphor. Turns out the reason we know it's not a computer is we've never found any limit to what the brain can hold on to. So long as information is coming in, the brain, the nervous system seems to be able to play with it, hold on to it, organize it, synthesize it just fine. So people worry, are kids learning less? Do they have a worse memory now? And the answer is no. Our biology is the same. We all have the same, so far as we can tell, infinite limit. Until someone comes out with a better idea, we're all just basically saying, there's no limit to it. The trick is part 2 of memory, which says if you want to make a lasting memory, some sort of memory you can access in the future, the key is recall. It has very little with how information goes into the brain, much more with how it comes out of the brain. Every time you pull up a memory, that memory gets deeper, easier to use in the future. So if you think about it, there are things in your life that have only happened one time. Like you've had one, wedding day, or you dropped that bowling ball on your foot one time. Yet we have memories for these because we bring them up so often in our brain that those memories get deeper, deeper, deeper. Meanwhile, there are things we've built memories for thousands of times. Like if you think about a coin, right? From memory, try to draw what a quarter looks like, and then look at an actual quarter. You're not even going to be close. So we've got things that we've seen thousands of times into our brain, but because we've never accessed it, no one's ever said, what does a quarter look like before? Those memories become really weak and hard to access. So storage seems to be infinite, but it's this idea of bringing those memories up is key to their usability into the future. So now you can say, all right, if our memory isn't changing, what is changing? What's changing is the amount we access our memories. By definition, most digital tools never ask you to recall a thing. They do not need you to. They say, don't worry about bringing that memory up. I'll store it out here and you just access it later. So the less we access memories, it looks like our memory is dropping and we literally are losing memories, but it's not because of any hardware thing. It's because of the tools we're using are not allowing us to go through the process we need. And I think just a good example of this for your listeners is think back to when you were a child. What was your best friend's phone number when you were growing up? I know mine, 740-7857, Dan O'Swanson. Haven't called that dude in 35 years, but I know the phone number. Now, what is your best friend or closest colleague's phone number today?
Couldn't tell you.
I got no clue. I know where it is. It's on this phone here. I could press a button, but that's the recall issue. The memory hasn't changed. It's we're using tools that stop us from recalling. So we are holding on to being able to access less information, but not a biological thing. It's just the way we're choosing to kind of live our lives. Does that kind of make sense?
And you talk about the dangers of multitasking. You say that that's virtually really impossible to do, neurologically speaking.
Yeah. So if you go back to what we were talking about, that part of your brain that holds a rule set that says, this is what I'm going to pay attention to, this is what you can't. The problem is you only have one of those. So anytime you want to do two things at the same time, you can't do them simultaneously. The best you can do is start one, then you have to change that rule set to the new one, jump to this one. Change that rule set back to the old one, jump back to this one. So we don't call it multitasking. We call it task switching. You're basically just really quickly resetting this part of your brain to go to something else. The problem is every time you reset that part of your brain, you lose about 0.2 seconds of your life. So anytime you're multitasking, you go slower and you don't even notice it. Your brain basically goes black as it resets and you think you're cruising, but realistically, you're just losing time left and right. Your accuracy starts to drop because that part of the brain will start to get confused as to what's relevant, what's irrelevant. You start to make mistakes that you otherwise wouldn't make if you were just doing one thing at a time. And most importantly, the more you jump between tasks, your brain stops using the traditional memory network. So everything I've been talking about with memory so far deals with a part of the brain called the hippocampus. This basically is when most people think about memory, they think about the hippocampus. If you remember your birth date, that's the hippocampus. You remember who's the president, that's the hippocampus. All these things are in there. When you multitask, when you jump a lot, your brain no longer uses the hippocampus to lay down memories. It uses a part of the brain called the striatum. And just to be simple, this is your automatic network. So basically, when you're multitasking, you will learn. It's just being stored as an automatic program. So it's very hard to consciously access it later. So we say when you multitask, you will go slower, your accuracy will drop, and your memory will tank significantly. Not because the information didn't get in there, but because the brain decided, because you're jumping so much, we're going to store this differently in a way that makes it basically inaccessible to you. And what good is a memory if you can't use it, basically? Yeah, who knows why it does that, but that's all we've seen.
You talk about the phenomenon of creativity and how creativity actually needs to access deeply stored facts.
Yeah.
And therefore, we need to give kids a big database to work from in order to be creative. And some people think, oh, we mustn't load them down with a bunch of, quote, rote memory work, and we want them to just discover things. And actually, that's impairing their creativity, right?
Yes. And I some people get really mad at me when we discuss this, but it is the way it is. This is the way creativity works. So all what we call higher order thinking skills, creativity is there, critical thinking is there, deep communication, so communication effectiveness, that's all there. All of these things rely on long-term memory. So what happens is anytime you try to do something creative or critical, you start by entering into what's called focused thinking mode. This is when you actually try to tackle a problem. So if somebody says, hey, can you figure out a new way to irrigate the garden? Boom, you bet I can. I dedicate 2 or 3 hours to it. During that focused thinking time, you have a hard limit to what you can actually think about. This is dictated by what's called your working memory. Basically, your working memory is anything you are consciously aware of, but there is a hard limit to the amount of stuff you can think about at any one time. We don't have infinite cognitive ability. And you know this, like if somebody reads off a phone number, you can probably remember that. But if someone were to read off 100 numbers to you, you'd be like, I can't hold on to, I don't have the space for that. So when you're in focus mode, you're usually pretty narrow on what you can do and think about. True creativity really starts to happen once you step away. So let's say it's been 2 or 3 hours you're working on this problem. You need a break. I'm going to go have some coffee. I'm going to take a nap. I'm going to take a shower, whatever. When you step away from the problem, that's when things get to work. All those things you were consciously thinking of, all those little memories, those bits of information, they go back into your brain. They have to be restored in your memory, but they will go back tagged. Your brain basically says, hey, if you were just thinking about this, it must be important. So when it goes back into memory, it's got like a little tag that says, where does this belong? Why was he thinking about this? And now you enter into what's called diffuse thinking mode. Basically, your brain is now going to go through a process of what's called reconsolidation, and it's going to look for links to those memories that you completely missed. Totally subconsciously of you. You have no clue what's going on. Your brain's going to say, did you know this memory is kind of similar to this? Oh, and a couple of years ago, this memory was similar to this. You didn't even think about that. And let's say you've been sitting there in diffuse mode. You're just taking a walk. You're just hanging out with your family. You'll notice every once in a while, you get what's called an aha moment. You're just doing your thing, and all of a sudden you go, oh, I got an idea. Someone give me a pencil. That's your brain basically doing the creativity for you. It just found a link that you couldn't consciously find. And it said, by the way, this might answer the question you were just thinking about. And boom, now you go back into focus. So all creativity, all critical thinking, all that is the swing between focus and diffuse thinking. Focus and diffuse thinking. Now, if it was only focused thinking, then access to information would be enough. As soon as we looked at information, access was enough. Boom, I would be the most creative person in the world. ChatGPT would have solved every problem. But because the vast majority of creativity happens when you're not paying attention, and your brain can only deal with those things that it already has embedded within it. Your brain can't access the internet. Your brain can't subconsciously ask ChatGPT, hey, what's the capital of Oklahoma? If you don't know it, your brain can't play with it. That entire aspect of creativity is basically constrained by what you know. So I always tell my kids when I'm teaching high school or university, and they say, what's the best thing I can do to boost my creativity? Know more stuff. Learn more things. The process of creativity isn't going to change. I can't give you, there's no secret sauce to being creative. We all do the same creative process. It's always the people who know more demonstrate more creativity across the board. And people say there was a thing a while ago where people said experts are less creative because they're so constrained. No. If you test experts and novices on creativity, but you only give them about 5 to 10 minutes, which is what most creativity tests are, then the expert will always just go back to what they're good at. They're going to show you nothing new. They're going to just solve the problem, and they're going to look uncreative. But as soon as you give them hours, days, weeks, the experts always outcreate the novices because they just need time to go into that diffuse thinking mode. Which in turn takes time. So all the research in a very short term says, yeah, expertise seems to kill creativity. But once you allow the full process to unwind, expertise, the people who know more stuff, are always more creative than novices across the board.
I love that. I read a study about people, marijuana use, and people were tested on creativity by some measures. I'm not sure how creativity was measured, but some people who were given cannabis, that THC, were tested, and a group that wasn't given it. And they were measured and found that the cannabis users were less creative. But when asked how creative were you, the cannabis users
thought they were way up here.
Highly creative.
Which is really trippy. If you go back to the multitasking issue, we find the same thing. Is people who multitask learn less, but if you ask them, how did you learn? They always think they learned more than everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
So there's this confidence thing where people think, oh, I'm good at this. You just don't even notice how poorly you're doing, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Well, everybody store this in long-term memory while I make this quick announcement. I'm excited to share the Conversation Balloons podcast is now part of the Herzog Foundation podcast network. The Herzog Foundation is dedicated to strengthening Christian education and helping families and schools pass faith and wisdom from one generation to the next. You're still hearing the same great content, commercial-free, but now supported by a foundation that shares our heart for truth and understanding across generations. You can learn more at herzogfoundation.com. So we're here with Dr. Jared Horvath, and we have really enjoyed hearing you talk about how the brain works and understanding memory and storage. And I want to observe that we were talking about creativity and how it takes a database to work from. And I'm wondering if one of the factors of creativity is to have a huge number of nodes or points of data from which to make new combinations.
Yeah.
That if you have less data to work with, you're going to have a less sophisticated or novel structure built from those data points.
Absolutely. If you really boil down creativity is nothing more nor less than traditional problem solving. And I say nothing more because if you really look at it, creativity and problem solving are the same process, and there's nothing unique about creativity except people like the outcome sometimes more. But I also say nothing less because I think problem solving is the pinnacle of human ability. So I think it's the most important thing, but it's not different in any way that we can see. So what is problem solving? What is creativity then? It really is the mixing and matching of your current memory states to what we're going to call an unknown problem set. So the best way to think about it is think of all the memories you have in your brain. Do you remember that old game Tangrams? Like we used to play it growing up, where you just have all those shapes and then a problem set. So all those shapes are your memories. And an unknown problem set is basically that grayed out shape. And creativity is, how do you mix and match that which you know in a novel way to form a new memory structure? The idea being that once you've solved this problem, once you have this memory structure, that becomes a structure in your brain and you can address bigger, more complex problems. So at the end of the day, when you recognize that that is creativity in a nutshell, it is always combinatorial. There's one of the biggest guys in creativity research. It's a guy named Kaufman. There's two guys, Kaufman and who's the other guy? Steinberg. They debate on everything, but there's one thing they agree on. Steinberg recently said, all creative thinking is inside the box. There is no such thing as outside the box creativity. The point he was making is creativity is always going to be constrained by your knowledge, because all it is a recombination of what you know to build new nodes of knowledge. To say, I didn't know these three fit together in this way, that gives you a new way of thinking, which allows you to do more. That's one of the few things that Kaufman does not disagree with him on. He's like, yep, it's all inside the box. And I think what makes it so surprising is, and he makes a good point, he says, the reason why we're so struck by like genius level creativity, or what Mozart did or Rembrandt, was because we simply don't know what was inside the box they were working on. To an outsider, these moves they make seem incredible, like these leaps in creativity and in imagination. But anytime you actually look at a creative person, an artist, a musician, they will flat out tell you it's a slog. There is no such thing as just wake up and get a new idea. It's always just this iterative chug. And the problem is we just don't see that process. We don't know what they know. So to outsiders, it seems like one thing, but to insiders, even at the highest echelon, it's always just, I'm building more knowledge so that I can ask better questions. We've never seen anything really beyond that. So that kind of goes back to what we were saying. This is going to sound horrible, but just know I love kids. I was a teacher for years. That's all I love to do, teaching. I love kids. But there's a reason no high schoolers ever won a Nobel Prize. There's a reason why no important business or product has been invented in high school. It's not because these kids are silly or they lack creativity. It's because they don't have the knowledge yet. And that's why K through 12 education has always, historically been knowledge-based. We're going to teach you enough so that you can ask the big questions when the time is right. And that time is not in 11th grade. You are not going to clean up the oceans as a 6th grader, not because I don't love you, but because you're just not ready for it. And so that's where I think the knowledge-rich curriculum stuff was always a very good idea in education.
And we'll talk more about this next time, but ChatGPT is starting to substitute for a knowledge base and make young people think that they really just don't need one. There's a knowledge base they can access, but I came across some anecdotes. Goldman Sachs hired 23 perfect candidates, they thought, in 2023, who they found couldn't function without ChatGPT. And 71% of students who relied heavily on AI tools throughout college have are terminated from their jobs within 6 months. A law firm fired 6 first-year lawyers in 2024 because all of them were unable to construct a legal argument on their own or think on their feet in a deposition or a trial setting. And as a lawyer, I'm heartened to hear that, because I don't want to think that my profession becomes obsolete anytime soon. But we do want to talk more with you about ed tech and the tools that are being used and not being used effectively, and why that is. So would you come back and talk to us some more?
Of course, absolutely. I'd love to.
Great. Well, Dr. Horvath's website is learningmadeeasyglobal.net, and his new book is Digital Delusion. Yes. So get in touch with him. Do you want to give any other contact information?
No, I'm easy. Just look up Jared Cooney Horvath. You'll find me somewhere online. I do videos on YouTube. I'm everywhere.
Great. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LEAHFARISH. This episode is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.